The reading this morning is going to be from Mark chapter 6, verses 45 through 52. Mark 6, 45 through 52. Immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side to Bethsaida, while he himself was sending the crowd away. After bidding them farewell, he left for the mountain to pray. When it was evening, the boat was in the middle of the sea, and he was alone on the land. Seeing them straining at the oars, for the wind was against them, at about the fourth watch of the night, he came to them, walking on the sea, and he intended to pass by them. But when they saw him walking on the sea, they supposed that it was a ghost, and cried out. For they all saw him and were terrified. But immediately he spoke with them and said to them, "Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid." Then he got into the boat with them, and the wind stopped, for they were utterly astonished, for they had not gained any insight from the incident of the loaves, but their heart was hardened.
Thank you, Tyler. May God bless the reading of His Word. Good morning. From all that I have heard yesterday, the Ladies' Day went very well. There were 60 women, grandmothers and mothers and daughters and young girls as a part of the Ladies' Day. And I know that they were strengthened and encouraged through the Bible study and the praying and singing together and the meal. And so I want to express my appreciation for all of those women who are a part of the planning for that and getting decorations and all of that, as well as the men who served. If you didn't know, the men served during that event, and so we appreciate all of the men who showed up to serve for that. We have the planning meeting today for our Lads to Leaders program. We invite all of our parents and young people to be a part of the planning meeting. Jared would like to get started earlier this year than we normally do, which gives us more time to spend together with our young people. The Lads program allows young people to be a part of the events as young as 4 years old. And so if you would like to stay, the ladies have donated all of the leftovers from yesterday, so there's plenty of food to eat. We've got sandwiches and soup and salad. So there's plenty of food to eat. Please stay. Listen to what's going on with the program. If we run out of food, you can have Rachel share. I'm sure she'd be glad to let you have her part. But stay with us. Enjoy a couple hours together as we make some plans for this year for our young people. Also, the Vacation Bible School meeting is this afternoon at 4 o'clock. We're going to have a one-day VBS this year, which will be on a Saturday. It will be outside, mostly outside. And Curtis needs volunteers for walking our young people from station to station, or to oversee the activities or the snacks or the games, the Bible classes, all of that. There's a sign-up sheet in the foyer, so please sign up and let Curtis know that he has your support. Otherwise, it will be Curtis and Anna with 100 kids here. So let them know that you're willing to help out. Sign-up sheet is on the bulletin board in the back. That meeting is this afternoon at 4 o'clock. If you'd like to join maybe through the Zoom app, then we can do that. The discussion will be broadcast over the Zoom app as well if you'd like to be a part of that. Could you move overseas? Could you move to a foreign country? I'm not talking about being a missionary. I'm just talking about moving to a foreign country. We have been involved in the Romanian work since 1995. Could you live in a foreign country? In all of those years, people have told me I could not do that because. Some people say that they could not be a missionary because they could not be happy, or they don't think they could be happy if they could not be around their family whenever they wanted to. You may say, well, I couldn't move to a foreign country because I don't think I could be happy if I didn't have access to Meijer all the time. In the South, it'd be Walmart. Some people would say, oh, I don't think I could do that because I would be afraid I would have health issues and I would not have access to health care in a foreign country. Some people say, well, I couldn't be a missionary because I might not make enough money to be happy being a missionary. Some would say, well, I'm afraid to go to a foreign country because I might break a law that I did not know I was breaking and then get thrown into jail in a foreign country. What do all of these things have in common? Fear. Somebody mentioned one time, this has been many years ago, they said it has to take a lot of faith to be a missionary. And I thought, well, it does take faith. I would not deny that. But did it take some kind of superhuman faith? Did it take some kind of special faith to be a missionary? And I thought, well, what have you gone through that I've not experienced that required faith on your part? I've never lost a spouse. I've never lost a child. I've never lost a job where I didn't know where my next meal was going to come from. I've never had my house destroyed, burned to the ground, or destroyed by a tornado. Those are all events that require faith. I've never been struck with a health issue that endangered my life, where I thought I might not make it. That requires faith. So no, it doesn't take more faith or superhuman faith to move to a foreign country. It doesn't take any more faith necessarily than what you've had to experience in your life. Listen to this poem by Helen Steiner Rice on trouble is a stepping stone to growth. Trouble is something no one can escape. Everyone has it in some form or shape. Some people hide it way down deep inside. Some people bear it with gallant-like pride. Some people worry and complain of their lot. Some people covet what they haven't got, while others rebel and become bitter and old, with hopes that are dead and hearts that are cold. But the wise man accepts whatever God sends, willing to yield like a storm-tossed tree bends, knowing that God never made a mistake. So whatever he sends, they are willing to take. For trouble is part and parcel of life, and no man can grow without struggle or strife. And the steep hills ahead and the high mountain peaks afford man at last the peace that he seeks. So blessed are the people who learn to accept the trouble men try to escape and reject. For in accordance we're given great grace and courage and faith and the strength to face the daily troubles that come to us all, so we may learn to stand straight and tall. For the grandeur of life is born of defeat, for in overcoming we make life complete. This year we're walking through the Gospel of Mark with Jesus, looking at God's guide to a well-lived life. Last month we studied from Mark chapter 5, so the next logical place is Mark chapter 6. And so I'm reading through Mark chapter 6 this last week, and I thought, in this environment, how could we pass up studying Jesus walking on the water? God's guide to a well-lived life is based on faith. Would you turn in your copy of God's Word this morning, if you've not yet, to Mark chapter 6? And let's take a look at this old story and renew our faith in Jesus and His promises and His power to take care of us. First of all, let's set the scene. Jesus has fed the 5,000, 5 loaves and 2 fish. Beginning in verse 45, Mark writes, immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side to Bethsaida while he himself was sending the crowd away. That verb translated made means he forced them, he compelled them to get into the boat. Why? Why was Jesus forcing his disciples to get into the boat and leaving? Well, in verse 46, Mark records that after bidding them farewell, he left for the mountain to pray. John records this event also, and John tells us in John chapter 6 and verse 15 that the crowds wanted to come to Jesus and take him by force and make him king. So it might be that Jesus is sending his apostles away because he does not want them to get caught up in the desire that the crowds have to make Jesus a king, the type of king that he was not supposed to be. And then Jesus goes up into the mountains to pray, maybe to avoid the temptation to be that type of king, to receive the popularity for the wrong reason. But I wonder if part of the reason why Jesus compelled his disciples to go away at that very moment, the reason why Jesus was praying, maybe, was so that his apostles would be in the middle of the Sea of Galilee at that particular point to experience that particular storm so that Jesus could walk on water and strengthen their faith. And so Jesus is praying in the mountains. And verse 47, we see that there's a storm. The Sea of Galilee was located in northern Palestine below the foothills of Mount Hermon. The snow would melt off of Mount Hermon. It would flow down into the Sea of Galilee and into the Jordan River and eventually into the Dead Sea. And because of the way the mountains were at that point, the winds could come down off of Mount Hermon at any time, and it could stir up this very strong storm on the Sea of Galilee at any moment, and they could be very strong. And that's what happens here, verse 47. When it was evening, the boat was in the middle of the sea, and he was alone on the land. Now again, John tells us in his account that they were about 25 to 30 stadia away from the land, which means they were about 3.5 miles from land, which would put them, Mark says, right about in the middle of the Sea of Galilee. The Sea of Galilee is about 7 miles across. So they're right there in the middle of the Sea of Galilee, and they're in the middle of one of these sudden storms that popped up. They're in the middle of the sea. He's alone on the land. Verse 48, seeing them straining at the oars. How did Jesus see him straining? He's on the shore. They're 3.5 miles away. Could he physically see them? Did he see them miraculously? They're out there straining in the boat. These men are experienced fishermen. At least 4 of them are. They're straining at the oars, Mark says, for the wind was against them. They're afraid for their lives. Probably being the experienced fishermen they were, they would have looked at the skies and they would have said, you know what, it doesn't look promising right now. Let's stay here. But regardless, they're in the middle of the boat, in the middle of a sea, in the middle of a storm. And Mark tells us that it was the 4th watch of the night and Jesus goes to them, walking on the sea. The Romans divided the day into 4 watches, and this particular watch was between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. So Jesus has been praying all night, almost literally. And so at some point, Jesus decides to go to them, and the text says that Jesus is walking on the sea, which almost causes you to picture in your mind that Jesus is walking on top of the waves. Wouldn't you have loved to have seen that? He's walking on top of the waves, going to his disciples because they're scared to death that the boat is going to capsize and they're going to drown and they're going to die. And Mark says that he intended to pass them by. But when they saw him walking on the sea, they supposed that it was a ghost, and they cried out. The word here translated ghost gives us the English word phantom. They don't know what it is they see. Some kind of spirit? Some kind of ghost? What or who is that coming to us? And these grown men are afraid. And so they saw Jesus, verse 50, and they were terrified. But immediately Jesus spoke to them. And he told them three things. Take courage. It is I, which in the original language is I am, which is what God said to Moses from the burning bush in Exodus chapter 3 and verse 14. I am that I am. So Jesus is identifying himself, in fact, as the Jehovah God of the Old Testament. Take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid. Let's pause right here for just a moment. Stick your finger there in Mark chapter 6 and flip back over to Matthew's account, because Mark doesn't tell us about Peter walking on the water. Matthew does. Turn back and look at Matthew's account of Peter walking on the water. And let's compare and contrast our faith with Peter's faith on this occasion. First of all, beginning in verse 28, Jesus says, take courage, it is I, don't be afraid. Peter said to him, Lord, if it is you. Does that sound like there's a little bit of doubt in Peter's mind? Jesus, if it really is you, then command me to come to you on the water. Why in the world did Peter think that Jesus would give him the authority to walk on water? Well, it was actually just a few chapters before when Jesus called these disciples. He called 12 of them, and he made them apostles, and he gave them some of the miraculous power that Jesus himself had. You remember that? He gave them the power to raise the dead. He gave them the power to cleanse the lepers. He gave them the power to heal the sick. I can understand why Peter would say, Jesus, give me some of the same power that you have that allows me to walk on the water. Notice here also that Peter recognizes that he's got to have Jesus' authority to do what he does. Jesus, command me. Give me permission to walk on the water. Now let's take a moment and ask ourselves, how could Peter have the faith? Let's talk about that for just a moment. How could Peter have the faith to believe that he could walk on the water? How did he have the faith to believe that Jesus could give him the power to walk on the water? Let's go back and let's think about the things that Jesus has done up to this point. Just take a look at these miracles that Jesus has performed up to this point. Peter has already seen Jesus cleanse the lepers. He's already seen Jesus raise the dead twice. He's already seen Jesus heal any number of sick people. He's seen Jesus heal the blind. He's seen Jesus heal the deaf. Peter has seen all of these things. He's been a part of it. We go on and we see where Jesus has rebuked certain cities where he's been preaching, Chorazin and Bethsaida and Capernaum, because they would not believe based on the miracles that they were seeing. Jesus said, if I were doing the miracles in Sodom and Gomorrah that I'm doing here right now, they would have repented. And you're not. Peter heard that. Peter has seen further miracles from that point. In fact, if I've counted correctly, Peter has seen at least 14 miracles. Jesus does a total of about 38. So Peter has already seen 14 miracles that Jesus has done, and so Peter knows that Jesus has the power to do what he's doing. And so Peter says, Jesus, give me the authority to walk on water in the middle of this storm. And we know what happens, right? Verse 29. Jesus gives one word, come. One word. And Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came toward Jesus. Peter gets out of the boat and he walks on water. He walks on water. He's got confidence in Jesus that he can make him walk on the water, and so he gets out of the boat and he walks on the water. What about the other 11 apostles? Where's their faith? They won't get out of the boat. Do they not trust Jesus? The other 11 apostles won't get out of the boat. Peter gets out of the boat. Family, we need to ask ourselves right here, right now, am I doing what God wants me to do? Am I obeying Jesus' commands? And if not, why not? Is it because I don't trust him? Is it because I don't have faith in Christ? Does he need to do more miracles for me to trust Jesus Christ? You and I have the entire list of miracles that Jesus performed, including his resurrection from the dead. What's hindering our faith? What's hindering our trust? If we know the right thing to do, but we don't do it out of fear, why? What is it about the life of Jesus that's not good enough for us? The reason why we're afraid? Last year, we were afraid of the virus. This year, we're afraid of the vaccine. Next year, we're going to be afraid of something else. Because fear is a tool of Satan. Fear doesn't come from God. Fear comes from Satan. And if Satan can get us afraid, he can hinder us from serving Jesus Christ. If he gets us afraid enough, he can get us to stop serving Jesus Christ. But if he can get us to just pull back on our service to Jesus Christ, if he can get us to just pull back in our worship to Jesus Christ, he's got us. He's having success if he could just get us to pull back because of our fear. Peter obeyed Jesus Christ, and Peter stepped out on that water. And Matthew goes on to say that Peter saw that storm going on around him, verse 30. Seeing the wind, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out and said, Lord, save me. What was it about Jesus that made Peter start sinking? What was it about Jesus' miracles that he had been performing that caused Peter to start sinking? What was it about Jesus' power that caused Peter to start sinking? Of course, it had nothing to do with Jesus, did it? Peter started sinking because he took his eyes off of Jesus. And he started looking at the storm going on around him. Those other 11 apostles could not get out of the boat because they were relying on their own strength. They were relying on themselves. When we fear, it's because we're relying on ourselves. When we fear, it's because we're looking at life from our perspective instead of looking at life from God's perspective. And that's why we fear. And that's why those other 11 apostles never did get out of the boat. And that's why Peter, on this point, takes his eyes off Jesus, looking at the storm going on around him, and he starts sinking. Life gets hard sometimes. Persecution comes along. We get criticized because of our convictions. And we become fearful. And we take our eyes off Jesus. Or sometimes the economy takes a hit and things start going downhill and our investments start losing money and we become afraid and we take our eyes off Jesus. Now, the other side of the coin, same thing happens. The economy starts going really well. Our investments are multiplying. We've got all kind of money to do whatever it is we want to do. And we start serving self and we take our eyes off of Jesus. It's because we're just looking at ourselves. We're looking at our own power, our own strength, and we become afraid. And we do just like what Peter did. He starts sinking. And we start sinking. And Peter calls out to Jesus. Verse 31. Immediately Jesus stretched out his hand. Now that illustrates just how close they were. Master, the tempest is raging. The billows are tossing high. Jesus reached out his hand. He grabbed a hold of his apostle. But he doesn't stroke Peter's ego. He doesn't say, oh, Peter, boy, you did so well. You just, look how far you went. He doesn't do that. He says, Peter, you got little faith. You got a little faith. Why'd you doubt? What was it about all those 14 miracles that you've seen me do that caused you to doubt? What was it that allowed you to get out of the water to begin with and to walk on the water to come to me, but then start sinking? What happened, Peter? You took your eyes off Jesus. You started looking at the storm going around you instead of walking to Jesus. So Jesus stretched out his hand, took hold of him and said, you of little faith, why did you doubt? They got into the boat, the wind stopped, and the apostles worshiped Jesus, saying, you are certainly God's Son. Family, that's what Jesus deserves. When he walks us through the storm, he deserves to be worshiped. He deserves to be worshiped all the time, every day, every minute of every hour of every day. He deserves to be worshiped. He deserves to receive our entire commitment and affection. Let's finish our study back in Mark chapter 6. Turn back to Mark chapter 6. I want to conclude our study this morning by looking at Mark's account. In verse 50 is where Mark records Jesus saying, take courage, I am, do not be afraid. And then Mark goes on to say, then he got into the boat with them and the wind stopped and they were utterly astonished. Underline that phrase, utterly astonished. Utterly astonished. These men were shocked. Jesus had already calmed a storm before. Matthew chapter 8. Why are they shocked? Why are they surprised that Jesus has control over nature? On that occasion, when Jesus calmed the storm, back in Matthew chapter 8 and verse 27, the apostles had said, wow, even the winds and the waves obey him. Why are they utterly astonished? Verse 52. For they had not gained any insight from the incident of the loaves, but their heart was hardened. Their heart was hardened. They saw Jesus take 5 loaves of bread and 2 small fish and multiply them to feed at least 5,000, perhaps as many as 12 or 15,000 people. They saw that. Not to mention all the other miracles that Jesus had done. But they hardened their heart and they said to themselves, Jesus might not have all power. They hardened their heart. Family, you and I have got the entire record of the life of Jesus Christ here in front of us, including the resurrection from the dead. And why do we fear? Is it because our hearts are hardened? Can we look at the life of Jesus Christ right here and say, you know what, I can't put my entire faith in Jesus? How can we do that? The apostles had hardened their hearts. Where's our heart? If they had trusted Jesus like they should have, like I'm challenging us to do today, all 12 of those apostles had been out of that boat, and they had not had only been walking to Jesus, they had been dancing in the storm. That's what you do when you trust Jesus. Because if you trust Jesus, you know He's going to take care of things. So not only do you walk on the water, you can dance in the storm because you trust the one who controls nature. Where's our faith? Life doesn't get any easier. Not in this world. There's always going to be something to get us to take our eyes off of Jesus. But Jesus is there present in the middle of our storms, just like He was present in the middle of that storm. And Jesus calls us to come to Him, trusting. Walk on water. Let's learn from Peter's example and obey Jesus. Do what Jesus tells us to do. Let's not follow Peter's example and take our eyes off Jesus. And we can not only walk on water, but we can dance in the storm, knowing that Jesus is in control and He'll see us through. Can we help you this morning follow Christ by faith? If there's anything we can do, let us know. Let's stand and sing together.